is a fun surprise. You can actually run both versions of Minecraft on your Switch 2, because this is the 11th console that Minecraft has released on, and you might assume they would just lazily put the Bedrock version from Switch 1 on it, and you'd be correct too, but this is actually a more powerful piece of hardware, and so despite the game itself not changing, it actually runs far better, and to test / show you that fact, I've actually got the two versions side by side to show you loading times, frame rates, and even how many more entities we can fit on the screen at once, and so we'll also go into the other console 4J edition too, because this is your Minecraft Switch 2 overview, and so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more Minecraft console stuff, because I've been playing on a console world since 2012, and I own it on every platform besides the PlayStation Vita. That's why this video exists, to go into the good, the bad, and the future of the Switch 2 version of the game as it stands at launch, because the Switch 1 version of Minecraft has been long known as the joke of the Minecraft community. It just is the worst widespread platform to play the game on, and that's why it's so pleasantly surprising to do something as simple as this, our first test. When you load up a brand new world on the Switch 1, if you use default settings, according to my testing, it will take you 23 seconds when docked to go from pressing create new world to actually getting into one. This is, I guess, not the worst it could be, but when you do the exact same thing on a Switch 2, amazingly it takes just 9 seconds, which is almost 3 times faster, and it will save you 14 seconds every time you load up a world, which is likely due in part to the faster storage on the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1, but remember, this is creating a brand new world, and so it is a sign that the rest of the hardware is better too, but to really test that, we need to get into a game, and at this point, before we go into our second test, I do need to remind you of what is exactly the same, because I'm going to try and do this video in a bit of a good news, bad news sandwich way, so that you don't ever get too bummed out or too excited, because ultimately this is still Switch 1 software, and so no matter how powerful the console is, it's limited to Switch 1 hardware in terms of render distance. You'll never be able to see more than 12 chunks, even though the Switch 2 could definitely handle it, because this needs to be manually updated by Mojang, and just as a heads up, it took 4 years for them to do that for the PlayStation, so somewhere in the next 4 years, render distance will go up, we presume, but right now we are limited to the same 12 chunks that we have on the Switch 1 and the same anti-aliasing distance of 2. This also will apply to things like the graphics mode. In theory, you could get ray tracing working on there, but you can see no vibrant visuals toggle, and it is one of the big bummers of this version. However, one of the big upsides is that even though we can't see more blocks, we should be able to see more mobs. Mobs are rendered by Minecraft in a system called entities. Basically, there are two things in Minecraft: blocks, which they can just show you visually, they don't actually need to physically exist in the world, and there's entities which have some form of real existence in the world. So you can see right here, these blocks are considered entities, and so too is a rabbit, or indeed a villager, or a cow. All of these are separate entities in your Minecraft world. However, getting a bunch of entities can be really hard. You can use a bunch of TNT if you want to, or one of my favorite entities that people don't even know it was an entity is chests. That's right, chests are actually something that will substantially slow down your Minecraft world because you can interact with them, which makes them an entity, technically speaking. This means that if we want to get a bunch of entities, say somewhere in the order of 7,000, then we can simply place ourselves, using this command, a bunch of chests in one place, and if we do that on our Switch 1, you can see that the console comes to its knees basically immediately, whereas if we do it on our Switch 2, as I am right here, you can see that actually it's bad. 7,000 chests is more than I would recommend having in one space, but it is technically playable. I would say we're getting close to 10 frames per second here as opposed to about half that many, and so this kind of matches our despite the fact that this is purely a GPU and CPU issue, the docked Switch 2 gets much better performance of entities than the docked Switch 1, but again, 7,000 chests, probably slightly too many for either edition. Also, something that's kind of fun is when you're launching a bunch of TNT, which is why I have so many destroy blocks here, you'll actually notice that this works and functions a lot better here, which is why I have all of this TNT just existing in midair. But rather than confusing you, let's say that Test 2 is another resounding win for the Switch 2, if not by quite the same margin as our first test, and so then let's give you some more bad news, because again, like I mentioned, there is no way to access vibrant visuals, not right now in 120/180. If we try try to load up a brand new world, like you can on any other version, you should be able to find the experimental setting for vibrant visuals, but nope, not here. I can turn on drop 2, I can turn on locator bar, I can turn on villager trading balancing, but none of these will make our graphics vibrant, which means that when there is the 1.2190 update, it's coming out in the next couple of weeks, a brand new Minecraft update. It's exciting, but when that update comes out, all of the features will be available besides the vibrant visuals, and so the Switch 2 isn't getting one of the best Bedrock updates because there isn't a Switch 2 version yet. Okay, so our third test is one that's kind of subjective, but it's really important for players who like to explore their world, just like me, because having a bunch of entities on screen isn't that useful if you're not farming, but what is useful is being able to explore your world without having to come up against big borders. So in other words, having more render distance would be good, but what about the existing render distance? Does it render better? You get me? Does the 12 chunks actually function better here on the Switch 2 than the Switch? Well, the easiest test for this would have been the Blue Ice test, but I just cannot recreate. Okay, I can't get a good experience using a boat with the Joy-Cons. They are just not sensitive enough for the micro adjustments you need. Okay, the Joy-Con ones are so busted that I literally could not get myself straight here for any reasonable amount of time, and so I decided to do a test that was easier to replicate between both consoles, and that was to use the second fastest form of transport, that's fireworks. Like, you can see that the world is literally loading barely in front of me, but it is still loading, so give the Switch 1 some credit. Okay, don't give the Switch 1 any credit. But still, that's better than I've found most of the time. Randomly playing on new worlds, I will have the chunks just not load. But on a Realm, you can actually play on a Switch 1 with full render distance, and you can see that I'm getting most of my 60 FPS. I'm getting most of my 30 FPS. I'm getting multiple frames per second. Oh, look how many frames I've got. Okay, and so now it's time to do that exact same test, but here on my Switch 2. To keep it fair, I am going to be throwing a firework every few seconds. By the way, this is on a live copy of my world, because the Switch cannot download my Let's Play world, so that's totally fine. But what we're going to do is we're going to see my real world Let's Play, the one that I've been playing on since 2012, I mentioned in the intro. I'm going to be seeing if this world can be handled better by the Switch 2. So far, it's looking actually very comparable. You can see the game is starting to struggle. I've been flying for a while, and it's loading the chunks out in front of me with the same little judder there. Oh, yeah, quite a big judder. But instead of entirely cutting me off, it was actually fine after a second, and now that I'm over here, I can definitely feel there's something around, but it looks like I'm getting a full frame rate. You can be the judge of whether this feels substantially slower, but now that we're in the house, I've not dipped down to 5 FPS because I've got the sheep and I've got all the chunks around me, but instead, things are actually running just fine. That's right, I know this is not the highest praise in the world, but the Switch 2 can play a long-term survival world, a 1.1 gigabyte world that has brought many a device to its knees. It can play it and get a solid 30 to 60 FPS, even in the busy, crazy areas, which is actually pretty impressive. If you're curious, by the way, because this world is out for download and it's available for lower-end devices, to make it specifically work there, we have to cull a whole bunch of entities and stuff that are in the real world. But the real version of the world, this Switch 2, I can handle it just fine, which is really cool. And so yeah, if you're even stuff like all these maps, they'll load in just fine. And I think that is actually impressive. I think this is a harder test to quantify, but the play test, the how well can it load in my world test, really is coming out strong for the Switch 2 here. Every part of my world that gives issues is not giving any here on the Switch 2, and I'm amazed by that being true. It sure seems like I like the Switch 2, doesn't it? It sure seems like I'm saying this is one of the best versions of Minecraft, but I've now gone through enough positive praise in a row that I do have to give you the negatives, so because this is Minecraft Bedrock, it still will sometimes randomly crash. My game just did. It's been a while since I've seen that Nintendo crash message. I didn't know games could crash on the Switch, but the Switch 2, but they totally can. Minecraft was the first. I literally had the console for 12 hours before experiencing my first crash, and also interestingly, although you can find lag within the game itself by opening up a bunch of chests, and that's not going to be really experienced by most people, you can also get lag by literally being in the menus for the game itself. Minecraft's menus on the Bedrock version of the game were recently redesigned, and they're supposedly made from JavaScript, which is a very lightweight programming language, but despite that being true, I found horrendous lag on the menu, and there's just no way to avoid that. The only device where I don't have that issue is my PC. My Xbox One, my Switch One, my PlayStation 4, they all lag horrendously in the Minecraft menus, and I don't know why that is, but it is something you'll have to keep in mind, because there's absolutely no way to avoid it outside of playing Minecraft Nintendo Switch Edition. So to give you some good news to end this out with, if you happen to own Minecraft on your Switch before around 2017 when the Better Together update came out, you will own two versions of the game, Minecraft Nintendo Switch, as well as Minecraft just on your Nintendo Switch. And that is a slightly confusing version switch, I would argue almost intentionally so, but it means that you can play the old console edition as well as playing the Bedrock edition, and both of these games will transfer over to your Switch 2 if you use the system transfer settings, and this is really cool because it means that you can actually choose to play Minecraft on your Switch 2. I only did some very rudimentary testing, but you can see that the menus actually load faster here, and so even the Switch Edition has effectively received an upgrade from going from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2, and this means that when I did my Breaking Minecraft world, which in yesterday's video, I want to remind you, breaking Minecraft on the Switch was fairly easy. I had mushrooms floating in midair in no time. Doing the exact same thing on my Switch 2 was much smoother, and so very good news, I guess we can say. But at this point, it's worth asking about the future, because although I would love to see a Switch 2 edition built by 4J, we know that's not actually going to happen. We know that if there is going to be a native version of Minecraft for this console, which hasn't been officially confirmed by Mojang yet, but is very, very likely, we know from a similar experience on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 that a native version being created would allow for even more performance to be squeezed out of the hardware. Again, the Switch 2 is just running a game that is designed for Switch 1 right now. If they specifically designed it for the Switch 2's hardware, you would be able to get even better performance than I've shown off in this video, and even more crucially, you'd actually be able to get support for all sorts of things the Switch 2 can do, but the Switch 1 can't. A great example would be higher render distances. I don't know how high we're talking, but at least as high as the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 can manage, and indeed, that also means things like support for mouse mode could be on the way in the future, and even more fun than that, I think, is the idea that vibrant visuals could be making its way to the Switch 2. This is a controversial one because Minecraft recently pulled default support for vibrant visuals from the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and it's largely said that the Switch 2 is about on the power level of those older consoles, not on the newer consoles, and so will we be seeing vibrant visuals on the Switch 2? That is an announcement that Mojang have yet to make. Honestly, with regards to whether they'll support mouse mode or higher render distances, these are all things that I suspect Mojang are being quiet about because they're waiting to see how many people get this Nintendo console. Because as much as I'm enjoying Mario Kart World, and as much as I've enjoyed my time in Minecraft, you can watch my full first 2 hours if you want to, by the way, as much as I've enjoyed my time in these with the console so far, it does have to be said that Nintendo does seem to have a pattern of releasing an incredible console that sells really well, and then releasing a bit of a flop. I mean, look at the GameCube and the Wii U, and so is the Switch 2 going to be another one of those? I really hope not, but as someone who just bought a Switch 2 on launch date, I have to say this is one of the sparsest lineups I've ever seen. There is one game, which I got bundled with the console, and there's a Donkey Kong game I don't care about, and maybe eventually a Metroid game. The lineup for brand new games on the Switch 2 is looking pretty dire so far, and so this seems more reminiscent of a mid-console refresh like the the Xbox One X or the PlayStation 5 Pro. It seems a lot more like one of those than it does actually a brand new console lineup, and I hope to be proven wrong in the future. But if there aren't enough people who buy the Switch 2, I don't think Mojang are going to bother putting all of the legwork into making a new version for it, because the Switch 1 technically works just fine. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe my cynicism is undeserved, but for now, that is where Minecraft on the Switch 2 stands. I hope you all enjoyed this video, hope you found it to be useful, and as always, if you would like to see more, then make sure to subscribe, because I'll see you in the next one.